Hi, everybody. Welcome back to episode 4 of Teach the Podcast. My name is Avery.
My name's Hannah.
And today we're going to be talking about development, access, academics, and partnership, not just communication.
Okay, so first we're going to talk about development, academics, and access. I kind of just wanted to touch on different backgrounds in terms of this section of the checkpoint. So for the checkpoint, I wrote down students who come from different backgrounds and difficult backgrounds who might have experienced trauma or come from marginalized communities might feel less connected or engaged with the material. So making sure that needs are met, coursework is engaging, and relationships are built is important. And I feel like this is something that we've been touching on like all quarter, obviously. So I feel like I'm at a point where I'm kind of repeating myself here, but especially for those communities of kids who, come from different backgrounds or have special needs and they need that extra help, or they come from a marginalized background where their voices are not heard and not listened to, creating a community and a space where that is important, I guess community-wise and academically-wise, is very important. Like kind of connecting back to disrupting poverty, talking about, students who have to come home and take care of their siblings or take care of housework or do jobs at home, making school a safe place for them to learn and a safe place for them to come to and feel like they can be their authentic selves. That is really important. And that kind of connects also to just development as well. If students are not developmentally at the age that they're supposed to be, also finding different resources for families, such as occupational therapy, speech therapy, different auditory or physical processing things that might help them in their future, and kind of just making those building blocks. Like at my preschool that I work at right now, we're an all-inclusionary preschool, and we have so many resources for SLPs and OTs, and it is so important to also have those resources to then reach out to families and say, hey, if your student is struggling with this, we have resources. So again, having those resources, but also knowing those resources is important. So doing your own research on if we don't have something within the schools, what is their next step of what can they do? Because a lot of families might not have insurance or the money to pay for that health care. So finding hey, can DSHS step in and, offer those resources? Is there a low-funded community health center that they can go to? But finding those resources for kids is really important for their development, especially kids with special needs, and they need that extra help and that extra therapy. That is really important. So knowing those resources, sharing those resources, and connecting to families is very important.
Yeah, and then I wanted to touch on something we covered in chapter 4 of Disrupting Poverty, setting equal standards for our students. I really liked this reading, especially the part where we talked about learning gaps and how if you set different standards for students regardless of stereotypes or just differences, you can actually create gaps in achievement. And with those standards, if you have one group of students that you have extremely high standards for, unrealistic standards, they're not going to achieve those. But then if you have extremely low standards for students, they're not going to be motivated to achieve those standards. So you have to find that perfect sweet spot in the middle of something that is achievable for everybody, where they are pushed and motivated enough to achieve that, but where you can also challenge them enough to the point where, hey, how can I help you if you're struggling?
Okay, so now that we've talked about development, we're going to talk a little bit more about family practices now, and just kinds of ways that we can connect with families. I really enjoyed what we learned in class with the 3 C's. I honestly forgot what they were, but reading them in the moment was very helpful, especially with things like conferences and conference week, because conference week is something that is a nightmare to me. because I obviously don't want to sit in front of parents and tell them, like, your student is falling behind in XYZ. But that is also just me getting over my fear of connecting with parents. So implementing those 3 C's, not just within conferences, but also just within daily communication. I think that daily communication, or at least just weekly communication with parents, is really important. Something that I want to implement within my classroom with my parents is weekly or monthly newsletters. I think that parents obviously should also be involved in their child's learning, because obviously it's their child. If I had kids, I would want to also know, what is my child doing to, excel in their skills of math, reading, writing, SEL, like all of that kind of stuff. Gross motor, fine motor, physical, like all that kind of stuff. I want to know what my child is doing, and I want to know what my child is practicing. Also, so I can implement that at home. I know a lot of parents, obviously there's special cases where parents do not have the time to do these things at home with their kids because they are busy, or because they don't have the resources to get it done. But also just implementing things that are accessible, like, talking to them every day. Honestly, I underestimated the power of just talking out loud to your kids, because they retain words that you are saying, and they retain information that you're talking about. So just kind of accessible things like that. Also kind of with the weekly / monthly or even daily communication, something that I want to implement is a whole unit on holidays. For families specifically, I want to, at the beginning of the year, maybe reach out to families and say, hey, can you let me know some holidays that your family celebrates, so I can implement them within my classroom? Because I know that not all families celebrate Christmas. I know that not all families celebrate certain holidays. So ensuring that I am able to make an accessible unit for all students, just so they also grow up knowing, like, okay, maybe other kids around me, implementing that self-awareness. Maybe other kids around me do not celebrate the same kind of holiday that I do. So that also promotes modeling that kind of behavior of, like, again, self-awareness, and understanding that, not everybody is going to be the same as you. But yeah, those are just some of my strategies that I want to implement within my classroom with families.
Yeah, so building off what you said about holidays, I think it is super important to incorporate all different types of cultures and holidays into the classroom. Something I really want to do in my future classroom is Something I want to do in my future classroom is, like what you were saying, send home a letter to parents being like, hey, is there any cultures, traditions that you practice at home that we can maybe talk about in the classroom? And I also just want to expand, like, not teaching about the holidays that we predominantly celebrate in the U.S., like Christmas, Halloween, Thanksgiving, like all of that.
Easter, yeah.
Yeah, those. Because it's also just so interesting to learn about, like, what are other people celebrating at home, you know what I mean? Like, and again, like what you were saying about that self-awareness of, like, oh, maybe you don't celebrate this holiday that I celebrate, and I think that it's also another way to build community is by, like, sharing about, like, this is what we do during this time of year, you know what I mean? Like, the one family might celebrate Christmas and one family might do Hanukkah, and being able to incorporate all those into the classroom, I think, is very special.
Okay, and that concludes it for Teach the Podcast, the entire series. This is our very last episode, so thank you for joining us.
Yeah. Once again, I'm Avery.
And I'm Hannah.
Signing off.